What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Azure Functions live stream. We are coming to you on June 18th. And thanks everyone for joining. I see you all in the chat. We have some amazing guests and also some quite amazing swag behind our guests. I haven't been able to see the camera feed during that setup process. So Anthony, quite impressive. Anthony, why don't you go ahead? You can introduce yourself to this wonderful world, since this is the first time you're on a standard Azure Functions live stream. I know, I agree with Matthew. How did this happen?
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Anthony Chu. I'm a PM on the Functions team.
Great. Matthew?
I'm Matthew Henderson. I'm also a PM on the Functions team.
And I'm Jeff Holland. I'm a PM on the Functions team. We'll keep it simple. PMs. Yes. So thanks everyone for joining with us today. Hello from Copenhagen. Hello from... I'm trying to see. I don't see any other hellos. I'm sure I'll get them all now. And I'll just say this now because this seems to work. I was so pleased to see how many people liked this video before we even started streaming. I think we got up to 7 likes before we even started streaming. So smash that subscribe button, push that like button.
Jeff, not like this.
We appreciate your digital sentiments. So if this is your first time joining the live stream, we are the Functions team, or at least part of them. And we're going to go over some of the latest announcement, what's new. We're going to highlight some community contributions and blog posts and cool stuff. Actually, this week or this month, we were pushing out an Azure Functions survey. And for folks who entered, we were going to give out 10 winners, $300 worth of prizes. And we're going to announce those winners here shortly. So someone watching might be on this list I'm going to show. And then Anthony's actually going to give us a deeper dive into one of the features here. And even, Anthony, do you have a demo as well that you're going to show, or is it just you're going to talk through it?
I have a demo.
Of course. Why? I would not expect anything less. Okay. Oh, and hello from Czech Republic, Connecticut, Miami. Wow, this is great. Germany, of course. I have no idea what time of day it is for all of you, but I appreciate you joining. Okay, so we will get to it. Let me go ahead and switch over to our presentation because it's very fancy. So what's new? Not a whole bunch here that we're gonna to talk about what's new. I can get into the details. Like, we had a deployment that was like our build deployment. We made it as minimal as possible because we've been in a little bit of a deployment slow mode given all the COVID-19 relief efforts we've been underway. So this list is a little bit shorter, but the next list of what's coming is quite large because a lot of it just got pushed to the next release. That said, static web apps. Anthony, this was something we didn't even tease before. For folks who might have missed this announcement at Build, I don't know, do you want to give a quick summary of what this is and what we just shipped?
Yeah, you bet. So so it's a brand new service that allows you to kind of ship what I guess we call a static web app. So it's React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, or Hugo, but basically any kind of like a bunch of static assets, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Put that into a GitHub repo, and then with a couple of clicks, we can get that running in the cloud for you. Just geo-distributed around the world with a bunch of other bells and whistles on top. And then also you can add basically a backend API using Azure Functions. And that as well just deploys just along with everything else through GitHub Actions. So it's been something that I've been waiting for a while. So I've been pretty excited to kind of finally get my hands on it. It's been great so far, and lots of great feedback. And we're already kind of making a lot of improvements based on what we're hearing from the folks at Build and after.
Yeah, this is I finally had a chance last week because my personal jeffholland.com has been a static web app before, but I kind of manually wired it up. So I was like, hey, I want to try this out. And so I legit just like opened the Create Blade, put in the GitHub repo that I have my site in, and it was working. That was it. It was like the easiest thing I ever had to do. I had to do a little bit more work to sort out the Apex domains, but there's docs on it as well. But yeah, really impressed with this. So this is a very cool offering. If you haven't seen it, tons of cool content, blog posts, learn modules. Definitely recommend checking it out. And also I'll mention, and I see this coming in the chat, I am keeping an eye on the chat and questions that are coming in, and we will be answering your questions throughout this as well. So pop your questions into chat as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Go for it, Matthew. Yeah.
A couple of the questions that have been cropping up. So Azure DevOps support definitely something of interest. And I know that I don't see it in the chat, but one of the things that came up a bunch at Build itself was Blazor. I mean, yes, we want to make sure we support all of these different technologies. Initial preview, we just got to get started with more of these front end technology, that are more JavaScript based, and then GitHub Actions. So so far so good with those, and we should be able to move to other things soon.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. For both of those, Blazor and integration with other CI/CD pipelines like Azure DevOps, definitely something we're hearing, and we have plans to continue to address. All right. The next one here, I guess, Anthony, this is probably you again. What's this distributed tracing alpha? And I'm glad we've flagged, I guess, the newness of this. What's this one about?
Yeah, so for durable functions, a lot of people have been using it, and one of the biggest feedback that we've been getting is that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to see what's happening because usually it's not a single function call that you're trying to look into. When you try to dive into, try to kind of just see what's happening in functions, you're actually seeing, we're trying to see stuff happening across different function calls that are part of a logical orchestration. This can happen, over, a period of minutes, maybe hours, maybe even days. So kind of hard to kind of see end to end what's happening in a durable function app. So our friend Shioshi actually built this more or less on his own time, although he's now officially
now on the team.
Yeah,
team.
Welcome Shioshi if you're watching.
Yeah,
but yes,
so
before he was even on our team. Yeah.
So he built it. So we have it kind of and right now it's been shipped only for C# apps, and it's only available in MyGet. So we're calling it an alpha, simply because we're going to have to do some work to kind of merge that into the official extension. But the goal is to kind of ship that in the official extension, I think maybe in the next kind of minor release that we're going to have, so that everyone will have access to it. He has a blog post. If it's not here, we'll try to share it. That kind of walks you through the 5 steps to kind of use this new package and kind of get this lit up in your app.
Perfect.
And how this looks is that when you go into App Insights, you can actually dive into sort of like this end-to-end tracing view, this waterfall view. So you can actually see, your orchestration start, your activity functions getting called, and things like that. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. Yeah, I saw some folks tweeting about it and showing like that view that you were discussing where they can see exactly where data is flowing or those messages are flowing in an orchestration. Awesome. And then the only other one we had for what's new, which did ship before build along with these other ones, is a bunch of performance improvements. So this has been something I think we've discussed in the past and continuing to ongoing. Not much as a surprise, but just spending a bunch of effort making sure that our throughput is good, our cold start is low, our scale out is rapid and bursty. So there was a good chunk of changes that went up there as well. And so on that one, maybe we'll move to community highlights. And yeah, it looks like Mohammed asked too, what about live stream and the new UI of Azure Functions? I don't know if Mohammed is suggesting a cool feature, which would be everyone who goes to the new UI of Azure Functions gets the live stream while they're trying to build their functions. But if that, Mohammed, is what you were going for, I 100% agree. That would be well worth. I think I've said this before and I'll say it again. Wherever I can get my face into more places, I will gladly sign up for those features.
So the question is, which of our faces do you click for the bug report and which one do you click for the secret Easter egg?
And which one's the smiley face to give feedback and say this is fantastic? We'll let the folks vote on that. Okay. And there is some chat here. I guess I'll just answer this one as well. Because one of actually the areas that has improved is premium plan VNet stuff. And so there's a few updates here, which I'll just add because it kind of goes with what's new. You can now enable private link for inbound traffic to a function in premium plan. So you could say like 10.0.1.2/my function and actually have it trigger the function all through your private link, which is pretty cool. So that's in preview now. You can talk to other resources that have private link enabled. Now there's one that is still shipping, which is today for function apps, we require you have a file store that your code gets stored in, and that as your app scales, it's pulling from that file store. That has not finished releasing yet. It's about 30 or 40% of the way through, and I believe we have to wait for it to be completely done before we can actually document it because there's some final pieces that pop in at the very end. So that will be rolling out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. That will let you have a storage account that has service endpoints enabled that you can then join to that premium function so that your storage account is locked down too. It will only work initially with service endpoints. We've got ongoing designs with the networking team to continue to improve that integration and make things like private link work. But that is rolling out. I just checked the report earlier this morning. We have batches. It's like halfway through the batches, and then we'll pop it in docs. But we know that's a very highly requested feature. So we'll be sure to tweet out some noise once that goes live too, once that deployment finishes. Okay.
Yeah, so just to clarify then, so I can use the storage network integrations for pretty much everything. It's just specifically the Azure Files bit. That's the problem
exactly
right now.
Right.
So if you want to go ahead and get started by kind of like, getting things set up, like your Azure Files storage can be separate from those other storage accounts if you want to just kind of isolate concerns a little bit and start getting things moved over.
Absolutely. And the only other thing I'll mention on this too, I wanted to put it in the community highlights, but I think we plugged it last webcast. Michael Collier has written a phenomenal blog post that walks you through how to set up all the networking lockdown across the board. Just truly, no offense to anyone else on this call who's written a blog post. This is the one I've been pasting all over the place. He actually just republished it on the Azure Functions team blog in Tech Community. But if you search, I think we could even paste it in the chat window. Another great resource there. And I'm sure he will update it once that goes live. And hello, Simona. Thank you for joining as well. Okay, so for community highlights, a few here. Oh, and there's actually some. I think I had to cut this slide down because I had more. One that is always, there's a link here, aka.ms/function/links. If you want to get the hyperlink to any of these, go to that address and it will have all these other links there. One that I'll mention that kind of popped up organically is I saw some folks in the community saying like, hey, I don't really see like a good place for the community to chat and talk about functions specifically. Like there's a few serverless forums, but they're more dedicated to like planning serverless days event, or there's some AWS ones. What about Azure Functions? So some folks in the community spun up a Discord server. This is not the Azure Functions official Discord server, so don't think this is us telling you, but it's worth flagging. I've joined. I know Anthony's joined as well. If folks are interested in joining and chatting, there's always some interesting dialogue happening there. I check it a few times a week. So worth noting, if you want to join that channel, it's a great place to go. I even went there earlier today when I was creating this slide because I wanted to see who posted blog posts that we could highlight here. So here's a few. This one was a pretty cool one. I think this one actually was on Reddit. Travis Roberts has a really great video of doing session host management through PowerShell functions. This is actually pretty intense. I don't fully understand all the ways this works. It has to do with like scaling out and scaling in session hosts, but he's managing it all through this really cool PowerShell algorithm that published in a function app. And so a nice plug towards these automation scenarios that I love highlighting. I think it's a super nice fit for serverless or these automation ones. So a great video here. If you are using session hosts, I highly recommend checking this out. And if not, it's a great video, very high quality. This one, Anthony or Matthew, I'll let one of you, I don't know if you've seen this custom handler one. Matthew, I know you've seen the non one. I feel like I need to give this to Matthew because Matthew, you have a strange affinity with this language.
There's nothing strange about it, thank you.
Your affinity with it. I don't know why you love Swift so much.
There's a bunch of reasons, but I mean, I think it's always exciting when new languages hit the market,
Sure,
especially ones that are being very heavily community led. A lot of the functions team, we come from the mobile apps team as well. So
that's very true.
There was plenty of iOS development in my past, and compared to Objective-C, I like Swift quite a bit better. Now, are there problems? Yes. I mean, for example, we still need some networking things that are a little bit higher level, but it's really cool to be able to see people kind of taking these languages that are a little bit newer, or kind of outside the realm of what we would normally do, right? Like, Swift formal support isn't something that is necessarily, coming anytime soon. We have a whole list of languages that I think would come a little bit sooner. I'm sad to say, but the fact that people are able to come and start building using languages like this that they really love is super cool. And I love the idea of, it kind of goes back to that mobile story of, you want to be more of a client developer, build your application. But then you want to take whatever language skills you have and then bring them to, serverless backends. Like I think it's just amazing. And that way you can just write exactly the code you need to support your app. It's a great scenario.
Yep, perfect. And this is a tease to Anthony. He's going to dig into custom handlers a bit later as well in some of the projects he's been working on too. But this is a great one, kind of walking through, hey, if I do want to write Swift functions, here's a great blog that shows you how you can do that now with this custom handler feature. Renee had this one. Anthony, you shared this one with me. I was thrilled that somebody actually documented this scenario because this is one I hear about a lot. And this is the first time I've actually seen a blog post on it. So when you pasted this link to me, I was like, oh yeah, we have to plug this one. Anything else you'd add for this Selenium web scraper function blog?
Yeah, so it's been a challenge for quite a while now to actually run Selenium and kind of like headless Chrome type things on both Windows consumption as well as Linux consumption. So Renee just kind of gone through and kind of showed us how we can do this. It still requires a custom container because we still don't have all the native binaries that are needed installed on the host OS, even in Linux consumption. And we're looking into that right now. So, but for now, you can follow his instructions to get this running with a container on Premium.
Yep, exactly right. Yeah, and that was the caveat too. You do need a custom image right now, though it is a scenario we have been tracking as a team. And by the way, like this is we're all remote, right? Obviously, it's great to see folks like Chris Gillum on the call, Michael's on this stream, Simona. I'm like, man, we just need to do these webcasts so we can chat with everyone. And better yet, to my earlier point, I have the microphone. No one can talk back. It's just us talking to them, and they get to listen. But great to see the team on the chat as well. And then Cassie, this last one's actually really cool. And apologies, my OBS is cutting it off a little bit. But this is about Onyx and not the Pokemon, the machine learning model with C# and Azure Functions. And Cassie
definitely.
Go for it, Matthew.
Cassie definitely wins for best title here.
Great, yes. And it helps you know how to pronounce that thing, Onyx. And so this is a great one showing you how to deploy those ML models through a .NET function, which we know a lot of folks. Oh, and Miriam is on the call too, everyone. This is just a family reunion. Feel free to shout out in chat if you're on our team and you're watching us right now. Okay, so with that, thank you all again, by the way, for these community highlights. You can tell even just from, our conversation about sharing them around, we do pay attention to these. We do watch these. We do appreciate these. We know folks in the community appreciate these. So please keep posting them. And if you ever want us to be aware of something, feel free to tag us on Twitter or pop it in this Discord channel and we'll keep an eye on it there. Okay, so queuing Miriam is a great tease for this because Miriam helped put together this Azure Functions survey. Uh-oh, that's not what's here. Hold on, I'm gonna make it what's next. Close your eyes, everyone. Don't look at the rest of my deck. Okay. Because we have to announce 10 winners who completed the survey. Now, you might be thinking, what survey? And I want to be a winner. And guess what? You can still fill out the survey with the link here. You can't be a winner anymore, but that's okay. You can fill out. Go ahead, Matthew.
You're still a winner, but just not of this.
You're a winner in my book. This has been super helpful. It's a big survey. Like it takes about 10-15 minutes to complete. But it's been super valuable for us as a team. Just for some context, we've been doing planning for the next 6 months where we kind of are looking at big themes of areas we want to improve. And this has been one of the key areas that we've used is looking at the survey. And Miriam and folks are continuing to enumerate on it. And that's why I wanted to plug it here. If you haven't had a chance to fill it out, you want to get your voice heard, even though you might not win the $300 prize each of these folks have won. And congratulations, by the way, to all those folks on this list for winning. And you'll be getting contacted as well. Miriam's going to reach out to you directly to figure out how to get you your prize. But please fill out the survey if you haven't already. We really appreciate that insight from all of you. Great. Anything else anyone wants to add for the survey before we go to what's coming?
No, just like hearty thanks for everybody who's filled it out. I mean, it really has been helpful.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, so let's switch back over to here to what's coming. And people who watched my screen, and I see a little bit of an artifact at the bottom of my screen from that. That's okay. I'll just ignore it. Watch this. Whoop, whoop. Okay, great. Okay, so what is coming? Oh yeah, this one I snuck in. This is actually checked in, and it's in the next release that's going out. I don't have samples for you yet. So like this would almost be like what's new, because I think this is rolling out like right this minute. But we are giving you hooks in dependency injection to load up iConfiguration and manage your own iConfiguration. So a few scenarios would be like, hey, I want to manually pull in key vault secrets for things like local development, and you can pop in a configuration pipeline and load those in. Or another sample we want to have is like, what if you want to have an app settings.json file? Or what if you want to use Azure app configuration? I believe that's the name of that service. Yep. A lot of these scenarios become a whole lot easier when you can just use iConfiguration in .NET. So that is out now. I think if you go poke around the Azure Functions host, you probably could even figure out how to use it. But I've asked Fabio to give Anthony and myself some samples so that we can formally release it. But this is coming extremely soon, and something I know a lot of folks were looking forward to.
My understanding is that there are a few kind of gotcha limitations and things like that as well, though, in terms of like what things get hydrated by that configuration. So I just wanted to call out that folks should just take a good look at the docs. I mean, same with all the DI stuff. There's some really good content that will be supporting all that. So just, poke around and kind of see how all that works.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I know one of the big concerns here is like where people get into trouble today when they use iConfiguration is we, as the host, use iConfiguration. And if you start messing with certain aspects, you can break stuff inadvertently. And that's why this first class support is scoped to give you control without letting you break things inadvertently. So yeah, to Matthew's point, there will be some limitations to be aware of to make sure that you're staying safe.
Yeah, for example, we talked about like the Azure file storage, right? You're not going to be able to hydrate that from iConfiguration, right? That's us mounting the code in the first place.
Yep.
So those kinds of things.
Perfect. Or like trigger connection strings is another one because we need those on the platform. Yeah, very good point. Okay. Here's another one, and I feel like I've been talking a lot, but that's okay. Checkpoint control. This is another one that's coming in the next week or two, so very soon. We've talked about it before. It just lets it so that if you have a Cosmos DB triggered or Event Hub triggered function, and you want to continue to reprocess that same batch of messages on an exception, so you don't want it to checkpoint the stream and continue on, which is what you do today, we're going to give you some knobs. So you can say like retry this batch 5 times. You could say retry this batch indefinitely, which means that you might be reprocessing the same batch till the end of time, paying that sweet serverless compute, but it's your choice. So that's coming out soon. Anthony, I'll let you grab these two. What updates do you have on durable functions?
So we're working on rolling out durable functions for Python. So you should hear very, very shortly the announcement of a public preview for durable functions for Python. And for PowerShell, we're working on that as well. That is waiting on PowerShell 7. So those will probably be going out together. So PowerShell support for durable functions will be in public preview, hopefully pretty soon as well.
Yep, another one that's coming real hot.
You know what that reminds me of, by the way?
Yep.
I don't know if we talked about it on the What's New, but we do have PowerShell commandlets for managing functions now.
Oh, that's a very good call out. I don't think we've called that out in webcast before. But yeah, that is.
I mean, I think that's a thing for if you're looking at PowerShell and you want to actually do some automation against functions or things like that. That's definitely worth checking out.
Yep, absolutely. And Matthew, great segue. I think you've got the next few of these. So any updates on OIDC integration?
It's coming.
Yay!
Soon. It's I think we are a little bit closer to it. There's been some folks that we've kind of pulled into a little bit of private previewing. Things seem to be going well. This is really good for a bunch of different providers. For those who aren't familiar, OpenID Connect is it's a standard for being able to authenticate users. And a lot of different identity providers will have hooks for OIDC. So, if you're using Ping or Okta or Auth0 or you want to use Sign In with Apple, these things are all going to be lit up going forward. So we're very excited to get this in your hands. It will be in a preview state to start. And there will be some kind of rough edges to some of the experience just, as a temporary stopgap. But very excited to get this in folks' hands and kind of continue improving that experience.
Perfect. Yep. Great. All right. Oh, I thought the next one was the one that you were going to cover. I'll just go over this one quickly for time. Java 11 and PowerShell 7 are both coming in an upcoming release, so keep an eye out for those if you're interested in using either of those languages. They've been being worked on and starting to wrap up. This is the one I was thinking about, Matthew. You want to cover what this is?
Yeah, so we have this Key Vault references feature, which allows you to source app settings from Azure Key Vault. And there's kind of two main, I think, requests that we get. One is auto rotation. Today you have to do version pinning because of basically just some things that we want to make sure align as part of the scaling and distribution of everything behind the scenes. So that's coming extremely soon. We'll have that, so that you'll be able to drop the version reference and just have things update automatically. The other one is network access, which I saw somebody bring up in the chat. So there's still a restriction around key vaults that require, service endpoints VNet integration. That is basically next on our list. As soon as we get the rotation out the door and stable, that's the next thing we'll be working on.
Perfect. Great. And before we share the last thing that's coming next, Anthony, the chat loves your sign behind you. Do you want to just tell people where this thing came from? Can they purchase one off of your Etsy page? What's the story with this amazing sign?
Yeah, it's the only, as far as I know, it's the only one that exists in the world. But I have to figure out how to share the instructions for it. So at Microsoft, we have access to this garage space for makers. And once in a while, they put together a workshop. So one was hey, let's make a backlit bar sign. So okay, well, I'll go make something. And then so I just sent them my design. And then I thought I would learn how to use the laser printer or laser cutter and all that stuff. But no, I showed up and it was already done for me. It was like IKEA. And I was just putting all this stuff together myself.
Whoa, so they'd cut
so you didn't
it
have
time.
to use any of the tech yourself?
No, so the only thing they had me do was here's a soldering iron, if you can remember how you did it in high school.
Yeah.
And I spent half an hour with it. I couldn't do it. And they were like, no, just kidding. Here's a connector. So so I was literally just going to IKEA, picking out one of those things. But I'll try to blog maybe how to make one of those so everyone can have it as well.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. I'm glad it shows up. Sometimes Teams seems to want to crop it out. I guess I could say fit to frame.
Yeah,
other way. There we go. Yeah. Look at that. Give it some nice glory. Okay, and then the last one here is we've been working with the Dapper team, and coming soon is some work to let you integrate functions with Dapper much easier. This will be supported for environments that support Dapper today, and so primarily like Kubernetes, AKS. But this is a nice extension so that if you want to augment and add a bunch of additional capabilities to your function, like being able to do pub sub or service to service invocation, or use the Dapper abstracted state store to do state management or secret references or whatever else, all of those things you could just pop in now as triggers and bindings, so that you don't have to go worry about using the Dapper SDK, and functions will go wire everything up and talk to Dapper for you. So this is pretty cool for those of you who've followed, Dapper's fairly new, but we feel like it provides a lot of building blocks that are useful in these cloud native scenarios, specifically in Kubernetes today. And so keep an eye out for a blog post and announcement coming on that one. Okay. And we already did survey winners, and thank you again. And Miriam mentioned in chat, thank you very much for those who filled out the chat. Okay, Anthony, I think this is your time now. And then after this one, we can answer some more questions. But we're going to talk a little bit about custom handlers.
All right. This is the part where you get to see me fumble around with Teams.
That's okay. We can all just admire the sign. We see your screen.
All right, it's working. That's good. All right, so custom handlers was actually something that Matthew worked on for a while and brought it to public preview. And I guess he's now passed on the baton to me to kind of take it to GA. So I understand we haven't really talked a ton about it, so I thought we would spend a few minutes just talking about what they are, as well as show you a quick demo. So if I can change slides too, that'd be great. Here we go. So quite often, actually more often than I would like, it's people always ask, we love all these languages that you support in functions, but can you support, can I write my functions in? They always name some obscure thing, or even something like Go, and be like, and then the answer is like, well, not yet, or not easily. So this is something that custom handlers is here to solve. So I think going forward, it's going to be our main language extensibility point for functions. So if we want to run a language or runtime that we don't currently support in functions, custom handlers is where we're going to be sending you to. And how it works is that basically any language or any runtime that can stand up an HTTP server can be a custom handler. And so, and I'll have a slide after this to kind of show you how it works. But it supports all triggers and bindings. So even though that you're hosting an HTTP process basically to kind of respond to function calls, we support all the triggers and bindings that we currently support in the regular Azure Functions runtime. And for most languages, you can deploy it to the consumption plan. Some of them, some runtimes require some pretty like native kind of either libraries, or they need a pretty kind of involved installation process. In those cases, you'll have to fall back to building your own container and running it in consumption, or is it running it in premium? But for the most part, most of the ones that I've tried, you are able to just more or less build a binary that's compatible with the platform that you're running on in consumption plan, whether it's Windows or Linux, and you're able to just deploy your files there, and it runs. And one thing that I'm kind of pretty excited about is that it enables a community to build a bunch of language workers for functions. So it's easy enough to kind of like just stand up a web server in the language that you want to build. But at the end of the day, you still have to kind of write a process that stands up an HTTP server just so that you can write your functions. I think it'd be great if people can just start pulling in libraries from the community that other folks have built into their app. And then the next thing to do is they're just writing functions. So they don't have to worry about standing up an HTTP server or understanding the protocol. They're just basically building a function app. So I think this is a great way to build language workers. So just quickly about how it works. So this is currently how functions works for anything that's not .NET. So anything that's out of process. We basically run this thing on the side for you called the language worker. And it talks to the runtime over gRPC. So the way that custom handlers works is that you're able to supply your own web server. So whether this is just a Go binary or like like a PHP thing, as long as you can stand up a web server, you can now basically have something that can behave like a language worker. And then within that, you have your function code. And like I was saying before, any trigger that we currently support, as well as bindings, we'll just work with it because that's all handled by the function host. And then for every function invocation, we're just sending you an HTTP request. So one of the things that I've been working on, sort of almost like as a reference implementation, is to try to add support for this thing called Deno, which came from the creator of Node, and some people are seeing it as like Node 2.0 kind of thing. But it's just a different runtime for JavaScript and TypeScript based on sort of like 10 years of learnings from Node, and almost like a Node reimagined type thing. So it's fairly new. It just came out like a month ago. So I thought I'd kind of build a worker for it to kind of just take custom handlers through its paces, as well as kind of provide a reference implementation on how you can build a worker on top of custom handlers. So we talked about it before. So we've already had quite a few people kind of either run custom handlers, just kind of run their own HTTP servers, or they've actually built like a worker on top of HTTP handlers, or sorry, custom handlers. And so one of them is Saleh. He kind of built it in for Swift that Matthew's super excited about. So he's got an article here about how you can get that working. I've seen one for Racket. To be completely honest, I don't even know what Racket is, but apparently it runs on Azure Functions using custom handlers. There's one for PHP. And then we also have a bunch of other samples as well at github.com/Azure samples/functions custom handlers. So you can see some for Java, R, Rust, Go, all sorts of things. And then of course you can build your own. So So I'll just quickly walk you through this Deno thing that I did. So it's been published to the Deno kind of third-party modules repository, so with some instructions to get started. And then if you actually head over to the GitHub page, you can actually just click a button to get started in a VS Code or a VS Code space, or even a GitHub code space like I have here. And you can actually have pretty much everything pre-installed to get up and running with Deno. But I'm actually going to show you just a quick demo locally about how this thing works. So, so one thing that I kind of built for it as well to kind of go along with the worker is, and the Swift one has it as well, is basically a CLI to kind of scaffold an application as well as to kind of run and deploy the application. So I kind of call it Deno Func. And then, of course, we have ASCII art. That's almost a requirement.
This is
actually
very
funny aside on ASCII art. So there's actually a current active GitHub issue on the core tools repo where I'm trying to figure out how. Basically, we're discussing how we can have less verbose output. And one of the discussions was, should we remove the ASCII art?
Oh,
so,
wow.
So if anyone feels passionate, actually, I probably
paste
shouldn't.
that issue in there.
I probably shouldn't send people to it because we really thought, there's really a comment that says maybe this needs to be a separate issue.
Yeah, I agree with the overall issue that we could be more succinct in our default logs, but that ASCII art, I never have done a function demo without pausing on that art and just wallowing in the joy of it. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So let's quickly kind of show you how you can scaffold an app. So I'm just go with, actually, might be in the wrong folder here. So Deno Func init, and that just kind of scaffolds an application. And then from that point on, I can just go code dot, and I can open up code. And then from within code, you can actually browse around. I actually have it integrated with this thing called Code Tour. So so once it loads, it's actually a tour, a guided tour. It's kind of hidden by this thing that I have. Oh no, what happened?
Can we take a moment to appreciate that you can just walk up to this repo, deploy it into a code space, and then start a code tour and get like a walkthrough, all without pretty much anything. You just go to the GitHub page and click a button. I think that's magical.
I've been in love with this thing. I've been in love with these dev containers. I know you love them too, Matthew. Oh, yeah. But also like just code spaces, code tour, VS Code remote with containers. Oh my goodness, like this is all like such cool stuff that we have. But I thought I would use this as an opportunity to kind of try out different ways to get started with functions as well, because that's one of the things we want people to kind of not have as much friction on. How do they just don't worry about acquiring the tooling and just get started? And then when they first open an app, how do they actually know what's going on in the app, right? So Code Tour by Jonathan Carter on the VS Code and VS Code Spaces team actually helps you with that. So I actually have it integrated in here as well. So you can actually kind of click this little arrow, kind of talks about, well, we have this functions folder here, and then actually walks you through the code about, okay, like this is how you build a function and stuff like that. So it's super cool. And I guess I'll just kind of quickly walk you through how it sort of works. So I'm also taking this as an opportunity to prove out like a new programming model for JavaScript type apps. And Marie on our engineering team has kind of more or less been looking at a similar programming model. So here, instead of having like deal with like a function.json in a folder, you can just basically specify your function as well as your bindings on the same page, or basically on the same file. So a lot more succinct, a lot easier to kind of get started. And also we kind of realized that a lot of people who work with JavaScript are building HTTP APIs. So I thought, what the heck, let's make every single function HTTP by default, unless you say otherwise. So you don't actually have to specify anything. You don't have to specify any bindings. And that just happens to be your app or your function. And then for a key trigger type thing, you just kind of have an extra block of metadata down below. I won't spend too much more time on this, but I will just point out that the host.json is kind of where the custom handler kind of plugs in. So you just have to kind of specify this thing that you kind of start up, any kind of arguments in a script path, when we're actually working on making this even easier to do. And I'll just quickly run it just to show that it actually works. Oh, I keep seeing Matthew.
Wait, don't act like that's such a bad thing. Dang.
Usually it's a great thing, but not what I'm trying to do. This other thing. But anyway, so like I have a command called Deno start that will actually basically bundle the app. So Deno is actually written in TypeScript by default. So we're actually compiling and bundling the app together into a single file, and then actually starting the functions runtime. And this is the verbose output that I'm hoping to get rid of.
But that SQR, it was beautiful. I did notice.
Oh, yes, it's lovely. So I'm just going to go take this and just hop over here just to show that it's running locally. Right, so there's, and then there's also a command for deployment. I won't go through the deployment because it takes about 30 seconds, but I don't think I have an output here that I can show you. But it says denofunc publish app name. And then what you end up with is an app in the cloud, if I can remember the name. Not that one. Maybe that one. I might have been testing 2 apps per day. So
the fact that you looked at that random set of numbers and were like, no, that's not the one.
No, that's the date. So like, so there it is. So it's running in the cloud. So it's super fast. I'm clicking, refresh, and it's like it's running super fast. So yeah, there it is. It's just deployed in the cloud. So from starting an app to running it to deploying it with 3 different commands. So hopefully other people will try this with I need to flip back to the slide deck, not Matthew. I'm hoping that other people will try this with their own languages, like their favorite language as well, and kind of build up almost like a community or kind of like a collection of these handlers and language workers that we can share with other people to make it easy to build Azure Functions in basically any language.
That's perfect.
And then quickly, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, what a great way to learn like Deno as well, where it's like it's the cool new language for those watching. If you want to go try out some new thing, this is a great place to get started. So really good walkthrough too.
Yeah, like I learned it in literally a day. I went from basically just sitting on my sofa on a vacation day, and Brian Holt from my old team just posted something on a channel about, hey, this Deno thing is going to go GA in a week. What are we going to do about it? And I was like, oh. And then like by that night, I already had the thing mostly running. So it's definitely a great way to learn a new language. But anyway, I just want to kind of cover the roadmap. So we're going to work on a bit like even better support for building language handlers or language workers. Right now, there's some cleaning up to be done and how we configure it and how we run it and stuff like that. So that's coming in a future deployment, as well as making it easier to run web apps. So some people have been wanting to run some web apps in functions. Typically, we would send them off to app service, and we still do for the most part. But a lot of people still want to do it. So we're going to make it a lot easier for you to kind of just forward the HTTP request directly to the web app. And actually carries through the route and all that stuff. So you can just run a lightweight web app as your HTTP handler or your custom handler, and it would just work. And also kind of working on tooling support as well, with both the core tools as well as VS Code extension. I think that's it for me.
Perfect. Yep. If you want to just stop sharing, and I can pop back to this one, and we can see recursive Matt potentially again, which was a delight.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Whatever you say, man.
Okay, so yeah, I think the only question that popped up around custom handlers too that you didn't cover is, could you do a custom handler and call a language that we have, like something in .NET? And I think the answer is, yep, you can do it. Be aware that there will be some whatever things that we can optimize as well that you'll have to start up on your own, but technically it would work just fine.
Yeah, and when you do that, I think we'd be super curious to know why you want to do it. Like, is it because you want access to some kind of dependency injection thing that you can't get with, with our main .NET runtime, or, middleware, whatever it is.
Yep, and this one was like people who bump into any like DLL issues that spring up from time to time, which is something we're also tracking aside from this, but that was this one from chat, at least from Mandy and Steven. Okay, cool. So I want to answer a bunch of questions. So I'll just wrap up these slides, and then we'll just answer Q&A for the rest of the 15 minutes. Just as an FYI, build happened. It was all virtual and all online, which also means everything is still there on the internet waiting for you to watch. So if you didn't get a chance to watch any of our sessions, Just a quick heads up, there's one that deep dive on functions itself that Max did. There's one that I did around kind of an overview of functions, logic apps, API management. I think those three, service bus or event grid. Static web apps had a good session, and one on automation. So definitely worth checking out if you haven't had the chance. A bunch of content around static web apps too. Oh, and that's it actually. So now we can answer questions. I have a few that I've grabbed. Maybe I'll just start with the bottom, which I think is the latest one. Well, that one I don't actually know. Okay. So I'll wait for that one. Okay. I saw you answer this one in chat already, Matthew, but just briefly, any news concerning managed identities for Azure Functions bindings?
Yeah, it's something we're talking about quite a bit. This has been kind of a goal for a long time. And so I don't have any news in terms of, forward progress there. We don't really have timelines attached to it, but there's been a lot of good conversations around it and coordination with the Azure SDK teams, identity teams, and so forth. So I think we kind of have the general direction, but still ironing out a few details, but definitely something we're working on.
Yep. And then one from Alun that came up was, is Application Insights the only way of viewing Azure function logs now? I think specifically this is in response to in the new portal, by default, we connect to the App Insights live stream. And so for folks who don't have App Insights enabled, it's a harder time for them to look at those logs. So
to be clear, this is the streaming thing in the portal that was being discussed earlier, not putting our faces there.
Ah, I see. Yes, that's the stream. Oh, blast. I loved my version of that where it's like show the function stream. No, it's show my log stream.
Yeah. So for log streaming, App Insights is needed in the portal right now, but it's not the only place to get your logs, right? You can also have them route through to a log analytics workspace and use the data explorer type stuff on top of it and so forth, right?
That's right. And for apps that are in Windows consumption, I believe you can still navigate somewhere to like the what's called the Kudu log stream. This is an element though, like I'll just give a heads up, like we have heard a little bit of chatter from folks around this behavior change that we did. We did it to try to be consistent. Previously, we were in a weird spot where like if you were on Linux consumption apps, logging was really not reliable. And if you were on Windows, you got this different flavor of logging. And so we're like, well, let's just unify it around App Insights, which in theory is like, okay, that makes sense, especially given the direction of App Insights and Azure Monitor. But we have seen it's introduced a little bit of friction for folks. So definitely an ongoing discussion with us. So feel free to keep kind of feedback coming. But I imagine we'll be doing some tweaks of this integration in the coming weeks to address some of that feedback we've heard. So good question. And yeah, more relevant than popping a YouTube stream into the Azure portal. Though Leon would love it too. And then a few questions around proxies, both does Azure Static Web App support proxies and just proxies in general? Like what's the story with function proxies? I know this is something we've talked about from time to time. I don't know, Anthony or Matthew, I've got an answer to this one, but I don't know if any of you have any thoughts around proxies, both static web app or otherwise.
So I don't think it's in static web apps. I'm not aware of any plans there. I don't know if anybody else has insight into that, but I'm not really sure that there's anything on that front. In terms of proxies in general, I think it's one of those, like, there's no firm plans. I'd be curious to understand kind of what's prompting that question and sort of what scenarios you're looking at. But I don't know, Jeff, Anthony, what do you guys think?
I was going to say more of the same. In general, where we've been investing more is trying to make the story between API management and functions a little bit stronger. I think one of the things that we've mentioned in a few streams before is even when functions started, because we wanted to add a bunch of functionality really quickly, we would do things like, hey, we're going to manage our own log story and we're going to manage our own API management story and we're going to do all of these things. But as the service grew and as it scaled, it's hard for us to manage a programming model and a hosting service and a log service and an API management service. And so we've been trying to leverage much more of that ecosystem and just make sure Azure Functions integrates really great with the rest of Azure. Proxies is definitely a good candidate for this. We're not deprecating it. It's still usable. I use it for very quick things where I'm doing like a load test and I need to validate a URL. I'll pop in a proxy there because it's really easy. But for more advanced scenarios or like production stuff, we are recommending folks use API management more, especially now that they have the consumption tier. They're continuing to improve that. So that's where most of our investment is going. So that's where, to Matthew's point, like we don't have anything planned for like proxies v2. If anything, we're really just leaning more heavily into the API management story to help provide that functionality plus so much more. Like API management does way more than proxies does, and rather than us try to catch up.
Like proxies really was there to solve the composition problem of having multiple microservices and needing to front them with a single, basically, domain. And so we have other tools for that. And something like API management is more specifically around management, right? If you need API to be managed, hey, there's all these capabilities for the way it does throttling, the way it does policy enforcement, things like that. You may not need all of those, and I think the consumption tier helps kind of streamline things a good bit. And we're working with the API management team to kind of clean that up. And of course, you can also look to things like App Gateway and a couple other pieces of tech in the stack to help. So I think proxies is nice because it is sort of that nice lightweight version of that, but there certainly are kind of other more robust capabilities in the platform, and we need to have a good story there too.
Right. All right, I'm going to throw this one out there. I don't actually know the answer to this one. Maybe someone in the chat does. Maybe Anthony does. It's about Angular, and so I don't know anything about Angular. But can we do hybrid SSR? Oh, maybe that's server-side rendering. I think I just cracked part of the clue. Can we do hybrid SSR for Angular projects with Azure Functions? Okay, so I think when I figured out what SSR means, I know a little bit more. Anthony, do you know much on the server-side rendering and Azure Functions? If you want to use like Vue or Angular SSR, if you could use Azure Functions to do it, or if you should use Azure Functions?
Yeah, I think could and should are really the main question. I think because we just run Node, it should be possible. It might require quite a bit of work, but whether you should do it, I think that's the main question.
Yeah, I think traditionally we've kind of tried to shy away from having folks serve, content from their functions. It's not really what it's best at. I guess with server-side rendering, it's a little bit different than just serving static, files from your share or whatever. Now we have static web apps for that too. But yeah, I'm a little leery of the scenario just in terms of like how it will perform and such.
Yeah,
there might be a better tool for the job.
Yeah, I think app services in general, it's just purpose built for just that. So yeah, you could do it in functions, I would imagine. But yeah, whether you'd want to take on the additional, deciding on the latency add that might have and the routing stuff and whatever else, that's, yeah.
Besides, it's serverless. There's no server to render it on.
That's right. Serverless side rendering, SSSR. Wait, no, it doesn't. Serverless and okay, great. Oh yeah, and by the way, ASCII art for life. You're never taking it away from me. I will fork the CLI and just have Jeff Funk as my own CLI that is it's an exact alias of Funk. It just pops in ASCII art before every command. Okay.
Before and after.
Just very verbose with just ASCII art. All right. This is a good one, Ganesh. It's more of just like oh yeah, we should do that. Less of a question. I think we need input. But Ganesh asked at the beginning of the stream, for timer triggered functions in the dedicated app service plan, so not premium or consumption, is there a reason that we don't set always on by default? Because most things just stop working when you don't have always on and you're in an app service plan. I don't know why we don't do that. It's a very good question, because to your point, yeah, when you're not in one of the function plans, consumption or premium, you don't have the benefit to be able to scale down and scale up in the same way. So you need to have always on so that you never scale to zero. We should just have that on by default. I can't think of a good reason we wouldn't, and so it sounds like a good thing we just need to flag for our create scenarios to pop that in.
It is a little bit complicated there, but yes, conceptually it could be done. The challenge there is the nature of when always on gets kicked in and how it gets applied to sites on a given plan. So like the nature of that setting, like I didn't quite understand the trigger side of this.
Timer triggers specifically are one I think a lot of people bump into, but I think it would really work for anyone's. So
yeah, I think it would have to be just a general like this is the hosting plan you've chosen, so we'll do this, because we don't actually know what your site content looks like at site creation time, and that site setting is updated independent of your deployment schedule, right? So.
Yep. Great. So I think we grabbed all the other ones.
There's one towards the end here that I want to highlight, which is output bindings for MongoDB and Cosmos rather than Core SQL. I believe that there's actually some stuff that the Cosmos team is looking at around that. So nothing concrete there. This is me just saying what I think I've heard is happening. But I think it's something that's being examined, and I think there might be some stuff happening on that front. So I guess stay tuned.
And you're right. Yeah, and it's a good one. It's one of those ones that's early enough in the process to us, thinking this is something we want to support more for is the different API services for Cosmos DB, both for triggering and for bindings. And so if you would benefit from that feature, this is a good time to just flag us over email, Twitter, whatever, and say like, hey, by the way, you mentioned in the stream, this is why I want it. Those help a lot when we're at this kind of stage where we're sorting out priorities, because it's just like, oh, okay, here's the target use case or one of the target use cases, rather than us kind of fishing them out on our own. So the more you come to us, the easier you make our jobs. Okay.
I have one from Twitter, actually.
Go for it. Oh, nice. Thank you, Anthony, for checking
Sean
that.
Feldman.
Great, Sean.
Pinged me a couple of times to make sure that this gets asked is related to MSI and bindings and triggers like Service Bus. What is the status there? Does it only work in Premium? Can we use input and output bindings on consumption with MSI?
So the trick there is that there was a brief window of time where you could actually use them in Premium. So there's two angles to that. One is Premium has the dedicated instance, so we don't actually have to worry about the using the managed identity connection for the scaling logic, right? So that was one angle on it. The other was that it was taking advantage of a behavior that was in the version of the Azure SDK at the time that with an update they took away. It was unintended behavior. So all that is to say, we're talking quite a bit with the Azure SDK team to make this a reality. But at present, there isn't a formal story for it. For triggers is a little bit more of an issue, I think there. For input and output bindings, depending on what you're doing, you can bring in your own version of those SDKs and get things going using the token credential object or what have you. So that's it. It's not the best story today. It's something that we're definitely working on. Like that's kind of what I was alluding to with some of the stuff that we have in flight. But there was like there were a couple of blog posts that came out around that time which were rendered invalid by the update because it was not intended and supported behavior. So.
Yep, but definitely something. And another one too, I saw some tweets going out from John Gallant yesterday showcasing some of this Azure SDK work that's underway. Definitely worth checking out, but also the channel, as Matthew mentioned, we've been deeply engaged with that team. One of the scenarios we're flagging with them is like this MSI support for, you name it. And so whatever you want to do to stay engaged in that channel would be great. And you can likely hear I'm about to get busted into by a 4-year-old boy who says I've been on my computer too long. But I think that's okay because and we kind of addressed the Cosmos DB question, Alex, from you, in that we're evaluating updating a bunch of stuff with Cosmos DB. One of them would be using newer SDK versions and potentially supporting more API services. So before I get kidnapped here by a kid, any last questions, any last things anyone wants to plug before we sign off? Okay, I think we're good. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate, as always, we always really love being able to have these streams, have this conversation. We'll keep the dialogue going. We will have one of these in July. I apologize we didn't have one in May. Everything with build just got a little bit hectic near the end. Oh, I guess even if we do it in July, I'm actually taking a bit of time off in July.
You are?
So
yeah.
Someone might need to set up an OBS stream and get the cool graphics all wired up on their box. But we'll sort it out. Okay, thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Matthew. And thank you all again for joining. And we will see you next month.